Let's do a little soldering on your Jeep wiring harness. First thing you're going to need is a soldering iron. Okay, I'm not going to bore you with cleaning it up and stuff like that. Use some sandpaper, a file, something of that nature. Just make sure that all the black carbon gunky stuff is off the tip, and get it good and hot. Then you're going to take your wire. Now we are using an actual Jeep Thomas & Betts connector out of a 98 Jeep Wrangler. Now you're going to strip the wire back. It's not going to be very big gauge. It's going to be like 18 to 22 gauge. Strip back about an inch. Okay. If you're not sure what an inch is, ask your wife. Then you're going to take your wire that you're going to fuse onto it. Once again, about an inch. Okay. We're going to do a basic Western Union. We take the wire that's stripped, we lay it halfway, about a ½ inch of wire, and we twist it back on itself, like one spiral going one way, the other spiral going the other. So it's going to be something like this. Do not twist the wire up into a tight little rope. You want the strands to be malleable to get it to this state. Okay, next thing you're going to need, solder. 6040 rosin core silver solder for electrical. It will say specifically electrical solder. Don't get stuff for radiators. The thin stuff is going to come in a tube. It's going to have a little bit of the solder out the end of the tube. Okay, just grab onto that. You always want to tin your soldering iron before you make a joint. Tinning the soldering iron is just getting a little thin coat of the silver solder and the resin on the tip of your soldering iron. Then you take your soldering iron and you lay the tip of it on your wire. You just let it rest for a minute, get it hot. Okay, then you're going to take your solder and you're going to just keep feeding it in, and you will see the solder start to suck into the strands of the wire. Okay, normally if I was building a wiring harness, I would have the PCM mounted on the firewall, and I would have the pigtail, the connectors mounted in place. Now you just get it good and hot so the solder soaks into the strands like so. Okay, but we're not done. The next thing you're going to need, and I'm not using the good stuff for price purposes. These are heat shrink tubes. This is some cheap AutoZone stuff. It does not have the adhesive inside. For the good stuff, you want Thomas & Betts or 3M or something, but it's more than likely going to come from a professional electrical supply house. Now, the way heat shrink tubing works, you need to let your solder cool, and a lot of times you're going to have to slide this over the wire first, but we're doing this on a bench, and this is just to show you guys how this works. Your heat shrink tube slides up and over the solder connection, all the way over. Then you take a lighter, you heat it up, and the heat shrink shrinks down, making a watertight seal over the solder joint and the insulation on the wire. The stuff you really want has glue inside that will ooze out the ends when you've got it done and will make an absolute watertight seal. This is cheap stuff, but I'm doing this just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so then what you've got a wire extended onto here, because a lot of times you're going to have to start with something like this from a salvage yard, where you're just going to have to, go on eBay. There are sellers on eBay that clip these ends off of PCMs, and they sell them for $20 a set-ish on eBay, on Amazon, and it's well worth it. Now, the other type of splice that you're going to be doing is going to be a Y splice. Why? Because sometimes you have to have multiple taps off of the same circuit. So you're going to strip back the wire. You're going to kind of make a ring in one spot. You're going to move down about an inch. Once again, if you don't know what an inch is, ask your wife. Now, you can take and very carefully fold that wire over and take the cutters on your strippers and crimpers, although we're not crimping today. And you can start kind of getting a tear going on that insulation. And you can nip that off of there at your spot where you ringed it. There you're starting to see a little bit of wire. Now you don't want to break strands, but you want to get that insulation off of there, because you're going to need a strip in the middle. There we got it started stripping. Now you just take and get a hold of your little end there and peel it back roughly an inch. Now, you're going to nip that little bit of insulation, and you're going to take your piece of wire that you're going to use to make your Y, and you're going to strip it back about an inch. That's about 3/4 of an inch. We're going to go about an inch. Okay. Now you take this wire that's in the middle, you twist it kind of counter, fluff it, open it up, and you take this wire and you thread it through the middle, and then you take this and you fold it over, you squeeze this back down. Now obviously you're going to have to use a bigger heat shrink, but then you take this and you do the same thing. You spiral it around, making a nice, good connection like that. Now we're going to take a bigger heat shrink. We're going to slide it over the two wires. Once again, I'm using the cheap stuff because this is just a demonstration video of the two different types of solder joints that you're going to need to make to build your own Jeep wiring harness. Or if you want to do it on some other vehicle, you can do that. But you get that heat shrink on there over both strands. Once again, we haven't done that much with it. Let's go ahead and tin up our soldering iron again. Let's pull out a little bit more solder, silver solder, 60/40. And like I say, normally I would have the vehicle acting as an extra hand. And I'm trying to give you the view that you guys would see so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. I'm just feeding that solder in there, and I'm getting all of these strands coated with this hot silver solder. Make it hot. Get it all in there. If you see the insulation starting to melt a little bit, it's all right. You're getting it hot enough that the solder is going to melt and run and get in between the strands, which is what you want, because then it cools and it makes a solid electrical connection. Now you're going to let this cool just a little bit. And if you've got a little thing like this that you don't want it poking in your just take some pliers and flatten it out. Okay. Now, if you're wondering what my qualifications are to teach you this, it's like, who made you God? Well, I'm a journeyman electrician. At one point in time, I was licensed in 16 states. And people are going to be like, oh, you're not a master electrician? Well, no, because there's a misconception about that. Master electrician only allows you to own your own business and have a bunch of guys operate under you on your license that you're responsible. A certain number of journeymen, and each journeyman can be responsible for a certain number of apprentices. But if you watched one of my earlier short videos, you'll understand why I have absolutely no desire to get my master's, because it's hard to soar with eagles when you work with turkeys. And that wraps up the two types of solder joints that you're going to need to build a wiring harness for the engine bay of your Jeep. Thanks for watching. Hope you found this useful. Please like, share, and subscribe, as we'd like to grow the channel out. And stay tuned, because we're going to have a lot more technical videos. I'm going to go into wiring the injectors. I'm going to go into wiring the coils. I'm going to go into wiring all of the instrument sensors, cam sensor, crank sensor, your throttle position sensors, mass airflow sensors, all of those things. And we're going to walk through these, and you'll be able to build your own wiring harness for your Jeep. Thanks again for watching.